So my name is Roohallah Mobarez. Mobarez is my father's name. He wasn't born with that name. He was granted it from the Afghan community in Afghanistan. Mobarez means fighter, soldier, warrior. And it was my father's role as a Mujahideen leader. He fought against the Russian invaders during the Afghan-Russian War in the 70s and 80s. And it was during that time that a grenade blew up in front of my father, and he forever had shrapnel lodged in his chest, specifically in his lungs. And it was because of those war efforts that my father was granted passage to America. And we migrated here in the early 90s. We're a young Afghan family acclimating to the American culture, the tradition, the language. And throughout it all, my dad supported us. He was a security guard. He worked the midnight shift, the graveyard shift. And there was 9 of us. My mom, my dad, and 7 kids. And I'm the youngest. If you can imagine, 5'3", 5'5", gentleman in some security guard outfit, with early male pattern baldness. But he had a comb over to cover it up, real smooth. And he had this full beard, this beautiful, well-maintained beard, and these glasses that covered his face. And his hands were covered in these beautiful rings from Afghanistan. And 2 of his fingers were mangled because before he was what is, he was a carpenter. And you may have smelled my dad before you saw my dad, because he used to put on the worst cologne ever. And we used to make fun of him as kids. We'd be like, Dad, turn down, it's too much, it stinks, it smells like old wood. And he would make sure that if you didn't smell him the first time, you definitely smelled him the second, third, fourth, fifth time. Because he would dab it behind the ears, he'd go on the neck, it was very, very smooth, putting it on the wrists. And that was my dad. And when he would work the graveyard shift, he would come home just in time to take me and my siblings to school. And as the youngest, he would pull up in the driveway and yell out, "Hi, hi!" And I'd run up to the door and I'd welcome him home, and grab his lunch pail, and give him hugs, and kisses, and grab his beard and rub it into my cheek and my neck, and it would tickle, and I'd start laughing. And as the youngest, my dad used to always take me with him to the hospitals or to doctors, because I needed to translate, and I'd translate for my father. And I remember the time when my dad and I were in the hospital room, and I'm trying to explain to my dad something that was really hard to explain, and I'm like, doctor will get to diabetes today. And we're both like, what's diabetes? And I'm trying to explain this to my father, but console him at the same time, because this is such an intangible thing, as I'm trying to explain that there's sugar in her blood, and I'm a child. And it felt like I was giving my dad his death sentence. And I'm the conduit between this doctor and my father. And I'm trying to console him, because it was the least that I could do, because he was always there for me. Because I had my fair time in hospital rooms and doctors, because I too had a war injury. As an infant, I had contracted polio. And I still live with the physical disabilities of polio. I always will. And it was in those hospital rooms, those packed hospital waiting rooms, and those sterile hallways, and those elevators going from x-rays to labs and x-rays again, that I bonded with my father. And he became my confidant, and someone that I trusted, and became my best friend. And so when I was about 14 and my dad was hospitalized, it was kind of a relief that I didn't have to translate. My brother translated, my older brother. And it felt off, because I was always translating, but it was different this time. I got to hang out with my dad and just watch movies with him on the hospital bed, and it was cool. And I remember when we were there, and he's like, you should get a haircut. All right, I'll do that. Go get a haircut the next day. Really excited to see my dad the following day. My brother picks me up from school, and we go up at the elevator, and we're about to bust open the door, and I'm like, check out the haircuts. And in the room, there are men from the Afghan community, some of which that I haven't seen for years. And there's a sheet on my dad. And they sit me and my brother down and they say, "Wat heeft er fout gedaan?" And my brother and I, we start crying and we're grieving. His lungs had collapsed and I think that the grenade finally got him at that point. And when I catch my breath, I ask if I can give my dad a hug and a kiss one last time. And it's just some bullshit religious rule that prevented a young boy from having that closure with his father, and they told me no. And the night my dad passed away, I had the most lucid dream that I've ever had my entire life. And I'm in a courtyard with cement walls and barbed wire on the top. And there's concrete picnic tables in this courtyard. And in the center of this table is this bowl of nantat. And nantat is this dish, this Afghan dish that's shared. Everyone does their part. Everyone eats from the bowl of nantat. And across from me, sitting at the table, looks like my older brother. He's in like jail outfit. And next to us is my dad, and we're all crying. And I'm eating from the bowl, but I'm crying in it as I'm eating. I'm crying and I'm eating. And my brother stops me. He tells me something that I couldn't really remember. After my father had passed away, I learned to put on a mask and to hide the hurt and the fear that I always felt, and to hide the trauma. And I numbed the pain even further by just getting high all the time. From the age of 14 until I was about 20, I just went through this vicious cycle. And that eventually led me to commit this horrible crime that affected so many lives. And I was rightfully sentenced to prison. And in prison, I fought tooth and nail to never show what was behind that mask, because I was afraid. I didn't want to show that weakness. And until the 6th year of my prison sentence in my mid-20s, I was in a drug and alcohol program. And I was in a group setting, and we were doing this thing called empty chair. It was a practice where you're in a group and they put this empty chair in front of you, and you talk to the ghosts of your past. And in this case, it was my father. And I'm sitting there and I'm trying to talk to him, and I'm like, "Hey, Dad, I'm really sorry for shaming you, for dishonoring the family. Look at where I am." And it just didn't feel right. My therapist, this amazing human being named Miss Gary, she pulls me to the side and says, "What's going on?" And I tell her I never spoke to my dad in English. I spoke to him in Dada. She says, "Okay, let's go to my office." We go down to her office, this little cramped room. She tells me to sit down. She puts this empty chair in front of me. She says, "You are going to talk to your dad. I don't need to know what you say. This is for you." And so I stare at this chair, and I close my eyes, and I say, "Watai. Marbuch, Nabtu Kharaktum, Abruit Burdum, Sharakdum, Kulligir Sharakdum, Tochmak Jarastum, Marbuch." And Miss Gary, after I get done, tells me, "I want you to tell your dad about all the things he missed out on that he would have been proud of." And I go through that short list, and she says, "Now it's time for your dad to hug you." And I feel these arms wrap around my body, and these mangled fingers on my shoulder, and his beard is scratching my face, and the smell hits me. his cologne. And he takes me to this courtyard with concrete walls and barbed wire on the top. And seated at this picnic table is 14-year-old me crying. And we sit down and we all eat from this bowl of naan. And this kid version of me is crying into the bowl as he's eating from it. And I stop him. I say, this burden is no longer for you to bear. I can take it from here. And I open up my eyes and I look at this empty chair in front of me. And the dream that I had when my dad passed away that night, it finally made sense.